Peace to the tribe. Salute Full Blast Radio. What's going on? So I wanted to do this video as sort of a beginner guide to getting into comics for people in our demographic and hip hop culture that have always been interested in comics because it's been permeated through hip hop since the beginning, as we know. And we always hear about these characters and these stories and stuff like that through hip hop and movies and TV and whatnot. A lot of people, a lot of guys, and girls too, want to get into comics and don't really know how or where to start as either a reader or a collector, because there's two type of comic aficionados, I guess. There's readers, right? And then there's collectors. And then I guess there's a third, which is kind of in between, which is myself. A reader is obviously someone who just wants to read the stories. They're not really interested in old throwback issues and all of that. They just want to know kind of what's popping, what's hot now, what's going on in the world now, and read about it and move on. And then you have the collector, which is obviously the opposite. They don't, most collectors don't read their comics. Like, that's a big no-no. They'll put their comics in a bag and board, which I'm going to show you a little bit about today, and then just put it away. They never look at it. Some guys will, open it partially and read it one time, then bag it, seal it, put it away. Typically, what a collector will do is they'll hunt for issues that either were special to them, as a kid, something they dug as a little kid, or something that they just are interested, you have your favorite sports team, well, they might have their favorite characters, so they might just find what are seminal issues for that character, what are issues for that character that were big turning points in their life, or their character arc, or of course just find what's valuable. What's a collector's item, what's a comic that's gonna go up in value, has gone up steadily in the past, but it's something I can afford to buy now, and I'll put it away, till when it will grow up to a bigger value, hopefully, maybe give it to their kids, grandkids, things like that. And you have the in-between, which is kind of myself. I love to read comics, but I think I collect a lot more comics than I'll ever read. I'll never be able to read all the books I got. Just don't have time. So what I want to tell guys that are, new coming into the game, that have asked me, about how to get into it, where to start. If you're into it because you wanna read comics, you wanna, know what's going on with Wolverine, or know what's going on with the X-Men, or Superman, or Batman, or whatever you're into, and you want to read, then I would recommend personally going one of two ways. Digital comics, you can go to marvel.com, DC Online, or I like to use comicsology.com, and you can go there, look up any comic, any issue. You pay for it for the same amount that it was on the cover price, or whatever the cover price is today. Like right now, I think comics are between $3.95 and $4.95 for the bigger tier, Marvels and DCs and whatnot. Then you have your indie companies, IDWs and Image and Valiant are kind of, their top tier of the outside of Marvel DC world. But as they go down, as they become more indie or less popular, the cover prices go down to maybe like $2.95, $1.95, like that. At one time, comics were 10 cents, but that's back in the 40s or whatever, 50s. But so you go online to those websites and you can pick the comic that you want to read, and boom, you just read it on the screen. The other way is to buy graphic novels. What they'll do is, after a series comes out, after a bunch of comics go through being released, for instance, Secret Warriors just runs issue 1 through 28, and that's that story. Now they'll make a graphic novel for that, so you don't have to buy each individual comic, because keep in mind, every one of these being, $3.99 or whatever, that adds up quite a bit. But if you get the graphic novel, you'll spend a lot less, put it like that. So this Age of Apocalypse, $29.99, but you're getting X Factor number 108 and 109, Uncanny X-Men number 319 and 321, X-Men 38 through 41, Cable number 20, and X-Men Age of Apocalypse Ashcan Edition. All those issues are stacked inside of this one book. And you see how I'm holding it, because this is not a collectible. This is just, anybody can pick this up, $29.95, and read it. And that's what you want to do if you're just, you want to just read comics. Just buy these graphic novels. Some of them I do have plastic wrap just to, keep them in good shape. They don't really need a board because they're thick. Well, now this is like Wolverine's origin. So this is a situation where you'll also find graphic novels that don't come in issue form. Like, they never made issues. They just put it out as a graphic novel. So there's a lot of stories like that. This particular book, Wolverine Origin, tells, how Wolverine came to be, like from when he was a little kid to the Wolverine that we know eventually. You can see here they got the bone claws coming out. That's before they recovered in adamantium. So Wolverine's claws used to just be bone. They didn't have any blades, of course. And then that follows into Origin Part 2. But you get the point. You can buy the graphic novel, or you can go and buy each individual issue. Some stories are harder to find in issue. Like, this is the Weapon X story, right? This is how Wolverine came to be, how he got adamantium put on his bones, and how they turned him into, the Weapon X, the Wolverine that we know and love, right? But it was actually told in a book called Marvel Comics Presents, and each issue of this has 3 different stories in it. One of the little short stories is this Weapon X story, and it goes all the way from issue 72 to issue 84, and that tells the Weapon X story. But you can get a graphic novel of the Weapon X story, and it's in one little book. And a lot of people feel that that's a lot better if you just are a reader. Of course, if you're a collector and you want to have gems like these, you know what I mean, and you want to save them and give them to your kids and grandkids and whatnot, then you always want to send them off to the CGC and have them graded and encapsulated. So they'll give it a grade, 9.6, whatever, 1 through 10. Like I've said before, is near impossible to get a 10. A 9.8 is considered like the best, right? So they'll grade it and they'll put it in one of these capsules. This thing is sealed, and you cannot open it without it being obvious that you opened it. So the reason this is great for a collector is because obviously you can't read it anymore, but it's sealed in here at the time that it was 9.8. And as long as it's in this thing, it is a 9.8. So in other words, it's a very high quality book. So if you want to buy this issue as a collector, you might come across the issue, and it looks great. Like the cover's pristine, right? And front and back, everything's beautiful. There's no rips, there's no tears, like there's no creases in the spine, and it just looks beautiful. Well, you might not know that page 8 is missing or torn or got a coffee stain on it or whatever, and they'll have it bagged in one of these bags or whatever. But bottom line is, you don't know what you're getting, especially if you're buying online like eBay and whatnot, unless it's coming in one of these cases, in one of these sealed, graded packages by the CGC. And I'll get into it. I'll tell you exactly how to do that. It's real easy. You just mail your books to the CGC, pay them some money, and they return them in these grade cases with the grades and all that. Sometimes a collector, like, I'll get stuff I don't even know what it is. Like, I saw this, and it was one of only 250 made, period. Like, they only made 250 of this book with this cover. And so I snatched it up because I found it online for, going between $150 to $300. They were selling them at this grade. And I knew that in time to come, it's going to be worth even more, because there are only 250 made. A lot of those won't survive. You'll be lucky, if you find so many of them. So that'll be a rare issue. That'll be something that's worth something. It's not a character I know much about. It's Vampirella. She's a vampire chick. I don't know a whole lot about it. I think I've read one issue, but I just got it because of the rarity, and it looks kind of dope. Same with this one here. These three I bought because these are, I was a little kid and I remembered seeing this on the newsstand, like in the grocery store, and it's Spider-Man made by Todd McFarlane, who is the guy that made Spawn and Image Comics, along with Jim Lee and Rob Liefeld and those guys. But they put it out like this, and then they put out a gold edition, and they put out a silver edition. And I was able to snatch all three of them up, not at the same time, but I found them all. And just because, like I was saying, that's like a childhood memory. So that's the reason that I would collect that. Yeah, they're worth a little bit, but it's not nothing crazy, but it's just cool to have. The rest of this is stuff that I wanted to read. So that's why I figured like I'm in a third category. And a lot of people, I think, would like this category. And basically it's saying that everything I collect is something I would read for the most part, unless I come across, something like that. But for the most part, these are all books that I would like to read, that I'm into. So it's, do a lot of Marvel, and the only DC so far that I've ever been into is Batman. Another comic company that I want to bring your attention to is Valiant, because Valiant is one of the reasons that I started this channel. It was a Valiant comic I was reading that I found a Nas rhyme quoted word for word from Illmatic, and that made me really see that there was a connection from of hip-hop references in comics. We always knew there was comic references in hip-hop, but before Valiant I never really saw no legitimate, straight up, in your face hip-hop reference in a comic book. And so I give props to Valiant. Besides that, they do great stuff. Like they do amazing stories, and it's a lot of, and what's great about Valiant, this is a great comic company for beginners because they specialize in making things accessible. So with the beginning of every new volume, it will have a little paragraph in there telling you what has happened in this story up to this point, or with the history of this character. What's the history of this character, what have they been through, and all that up until the point that you're about to read the comic. So that's phenomenal, and for a beginner it's like invaluable. With most comics, you hop into a volume, you're not gonna know what's going on with that character before that, or what's the history behind that team, or those guys or girls or whoever in the comics. What the story has been up until that point. You kind of gotta know, or you gotta go find the old issues and buy them and read them, or go online, whatever. You have to read these to find out. But with Valiant Comics, you will never be lost. You will always know exactly what's going on in the story and with the characters. For instance, just as an example, this is the book that had the Nas rhyme in it. It's called Harbinger, and it's sort of about psychic, sort of like mutants. They're telepathic or telekinetic. They have all kind of psychic powers, like sort of like Jean Grey or Professor X. And people all over the world have started to, a couple of people have started to have these abilities and whatnot. And the thing with Valiant is, I think their slogan is something like the world outside your window, right? Or something like that, because basically everything in Valiant is geared to be, I don't want to say realistic, but geared to make sense in the real world. It's kind of set to be almost like possible, like this could kind of happen type of thing. Versus where you get bit by a radioactive spider and become, Spider-Man. Kind of unrealistic. But if they take your DNA, or they do cybernetic implants, for some sort of military application, or some extraterrestrial things, like the aliens will come. Like this guy here, Exo Man of War from Valiant, and it's about this dude who is a Visigoth. He was a barbarian that fought the Romans, right, back in ancient, times when Romans were fighting barbarians. These aliens came and abducted him while he was in their ship, tried to escape, and found this suit. And this suit was like, the aliens revered this suit as almost like a god, because it would never let anybody wear it. Every time one of the aliens tried to put it on, it just killed them instantly. I mean, so they had this prophecy that one day, you know, the chosen one will come and be able to wear the suit, right? So this guy, he, in a way, Thor is worthy to lift the hammer. He was sort of worthy to wear the suit. By having that suit, he was able to, you know, easily overpower the aliens and escape. And time he came back to Earth, it was our time. It takes place in our time. But this dude's from ancient Rome, and he's got a suit on from, you know, aliens. So it's mad interesting, super crazy, and just a really cool idea. And the concepts that Valiant has are always sort of in that vein. You probably saw the movie Bloodshot. Bloodshot is Valiant, homeboy right here. That's a Valiant comic. Vin Diesel played Bloodshot, and that's about, well, you saw the movie if you saw it. If you didn't, I'm not gonna spoil it for you, but yeah, that's Valiant for you. So don't be afraid to go outside of Marvel and DC and explore, because if I hadn't done it, I would have never found Valiant, and I would have never probably started this channel, and I wouldn't have known, you know, how deep it goes down the rabbit hole, you feel me? So once you've figured out what comics you want to buy and get into, if you end up going the collector/reader route like myself, a couple things you should know that they don't like teach you. There's no comic school, right? So just to break it down for y'all real quick, when you get your books, you'll order a package of backboards. You don't have to order, you can buy them at the comic store, or you can order them if you want to. And some comic book bags. Get your bag, take your board, slide the board right into the bag. Like that. They'll have a flap like this on top. Take it like this, where you have the flap side on the out and the short side in the back. You take your comic, and I always take the corner that's open, in other words, not the spine, and I slide that in first to make sure that those pages don't bend in the back when you put it in. Then you sort of aim it up, even it up till, you know, it goes in. Then you want to slowly work that down. You don't want to shove it down there, because you could bend it, crack the spine, and things get ugly. A lot of guys tape the flap in the back, and they put a small piece of tape right here just to keep it sealed. Personally, I don't bother with all the tape and all that mess. I've ripped actual comic covers with the tape as I'm taking them out, and the tape grabs it. So what you can do is you just tuck it in. Tuck that in. Alright. So you get the seal. Now your book is ready to display whatever you want to do. What titles do you want to get into first? Number one I would go with is House of X, Powers of X, Dawn of X. Okay, that's the whole new line of X-Men mutant stuff by Jonathan Hickman. It's great for a beginner because it really tells you the entire story from start to finish. You don't have to know what was going on before. You don't have to know anything about these characters in detail. You don't have to know much. It pretty much starts from the beginning and explains everything very well. And it's a new volume. So in other words, the X-Men stuff that was going on back in the day, in the 80s and 90s and 70s and all of that, all that stuff is over. It's not over, but that's a previous volume. This is a new volume. So in other words, they're starting a whole new storyline for each character, a whole new story arc for each character, for each team. They have new threats. Basically, it's just a whole new story, right? That you can start without having known anything from before. What also is another great thing about this is when you get all 12 issues of House and Powers of X, or you get the graphic novel of House of X, Powers of X, that's not where it stops. So once you've done that, then there's the whole Dawn of X that comes beyond it. There's titles like Hellions, New Mutants. Okay, all this is coming from the House of X, Powers of X storyline. So it's a great storyline to get into because it'll lead you into a whole bunch of titles, right? X-Men, X-Force, right? So this is all the Dawn of X, X-Force, Dawn of X, New Mutants, Dawn of X, X-Men, Dawn of X, Excalibur. You have X-Factor, you're gonna have Marauders, you're gonna have X-Force, Excalibur, Cable will have his own joint, New Mutants Wolverine's got his own new joint, so you got a whole new thing of Wolverine to go to get into, and it all starts with House of X, Powers of X, and then you have the whole Dawn of X line. So a whole lot of titles to get into based on just that House of X, Powers of X. It opens up a whole new world where the mutants all live on this island called Krakoa, which is sort of a living island. It's alive and it communicates with certain mutants and whatnot. On this island, they're able to grow these flowers that produce medicine that humans can use to live longer, cures all mental illnesses, diseases like cancer, all that stuff out the door. Humans never have to worry about these things again if they will grant the mutants sovereignty on that island, right? So now the mutants have their own country. Krakoa is their own nation. They have their own council. They have their own laws. They have everything. And this is to the point of, if you want these drugs, humans, if you want these flowers that we can provide and only we can provide, you have to give all mutants on the earth safe passage to that sovereign nation. So I don't care if the mutant's in prison for life. I don't care, you know what I mean, if they're being held. No matter where the mutant is or what they're involved in, you have to release them and let us take them to Krakoa, our new nation for mutants only and all mutants. Of course, the humans in this new world have to concede. They have to go along with it because, of course, like, they can't turn down life-extending drugs and cures of cancer and all this. They can't. So the mutants now have power. So now, for the first time, if you didn't know, mutants have always been the oppressed. They've always been hunted. They've always been persecuted. The humans have made up robots that literally go out and seek and hunt for mutants just to kill them. Like, it's an allegory, so it's a definite parable to real life, to racism and things like that. You know, you may or may not know, Stan Lee created Professor X and Magneto as sort of metaphors for Malcolm X and Martin Luther King. Of course, he flipped it though, because Professor X is based on Martin Luther King. He believes that mutants and humans can work together. They should be equals, live harmoniously together, and he's trying to get the humans to go along with it, and sometimes they do, sometimes they don't, but he always protects the humans. You know, if they're being attacked by evil mutants or whatever, that's where the X-Men come in and, you know, save the humans and whatnot, and he sort of wants, you know, harmony. Magneto is sort of like Malcolm X in his old days before he, you know, found out that, you know, all people could be Muslims and you know, sort of changed his ways. But militant Malcolm X, where Magneto believes humans and mutants can never live together. They need to be separate. Mutants need to have their own joint, their own nation, and you know, to be separate from humans. And then we can, you know, once we're equal on that level, then we can live. But we need our own. You need your own. Right? And so he's got the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. These are mutants that are down with his way of thinking, whereas the X-Men are down with Professor X's way of thinking, and they clash a lot. Now with Krakoa, Magneto and Professor X are friends. Like Professor X came to Magneto and he was like, I feel you now. Like, I see now that it ain't working, right? We need our own joint, and we got this island now, and here's the plan. And of course, Magneto's down, and all mutants are welcome on the island, even if they're, you know, Omega Red or Sabretooth, you know, the worst mutants, or Mr. Sinister or Apocalypse. Everyone's down, everyone's allowed on the island, everyone's allowed to have a say.